Mercedes-Benz, through a change in brand image, has become the fastest growing premium car brand in the UK marketplace.
Our role was to bring the reality of the product closer to the brand perception.
It was a major leap for us.
We based it on what looked like a movie plot.
Please, we don't have much time.
A jeopardous chase, proper real-time social interaction to drive broadcast action.
Now you can drive the story. Search New A-Class.
The sound of an AMG. It's unlike any other car.
The technological feasibility of this was just mind-blowing.
So across the three campaigns, the interactivity levels were beyond what we ever thought.
Having plot, character and conflict is a great way to draw people in.
The IPA award, that was a real significant demonstration of how successful the campaign had been. So this is a story of how Mercedes-Benz went from being the staid, conservative luxury brand to being the most contemporary, fastest growing premium brand in today's car market.
When we heard that Mercedes wanted to push through the 100,000 volume mark a year, that seemed really outrageous, particularly in 3 years.
One of the key drivers behind that was going to be new product into segments we hadn't really been in before. And I guess the lead of all of that was the new A-Class, which was going to transform the brand. But we had to get the brand ready for it. We'd been a brand that historically had been known for our larger luxury cars, and it was about time we got known for our more exciting, more dynamic, smaller cars. We were seen as a car that you'd have as a reward at the end of your career, rather than a car that you'd have during your career. It was really, really admired, but not desired, and not particularly amongst the younger audience that we were going to need to sell to if we were going to achieve our growth ambitions.
If you were to look at the type of people that could afford prestige or luxury brands, most car buyers couldn't afford them. And what came along in 2010 was a thing called PCP, which is personal contract purchase.
Which has made new cars particularly more affordable and accessible than they ever have been in the past.
Often when you're building a strategy, you look backwards in order to progress forwards, and we wanted to see what the advertising had been like historically, and pretty much it was all based on product facts. It was about suspension, on power, on comfort.
And actually, rather than help us, there was a chance that was going to hinder us, because continuing to talk about quality and safety kept us with the same brand positioning as being that luxurious quality product. What we needed to do was talk about the brand in a more dynamic way, to talk about the brand as being something more sporty, I guess more attractive to a younger audience than it ever had been in the past. We had absolutely no issue with people loving Mercedes-Benz, but it was when they loved Mercedes-Benz was, I guess, the key point. We want them to love it now rather than love it when they were retired and enjoying their pension.
The cars had actually caught up with BMW and Audi in terms of exciting sporty dynamics and modern visual aesthetics, but the brand perception had lagged behind the reality of the product, and so our role was to bring the reality of the product closer to the brand perception.
I think we realised that it was really important to act differently as well as just speak differently. We were starting to discover this dual screening, what was a phenomenon but is now a way of life. If we were able to talk to people with communications and they were able to interact with us, the chances were that we'd cut through much more quickly than just purely just talking at people, and that really for us turned out to be the case. Television became a central part of our strategic approach. Why? Well, because we needed to reach a broad audience. The ultimate example of that would be X Factor. The thought of Mercedes-Benz advertising in the middle of such a mainstream show in the past would have been unthinkable. But for us, it was a way of showing Mercedes-Benz was, I guess, relevant to that audience. So that combination of the media, engagement with digital, and the kind of product we selected was a really important component of the brief. So Escape the Map was a major leap for us.
And it was based on a woman called Marie, who was stuck in a dystopian world online.
It's just a disguise.
And the TV commercial was effectively a teaser into this interactive experience where we invited people literally to take the keys off Marie and drive the car through a dystopian world and help Marie escape the map. We stayed in plot and we stayed in character as long as possible. And it was only the user or the person participating in the experience who chose when to break character, all the way to the extent that when they got to the end of the experience and helped Marie escape the map, they got a phone call on their mobile phone with Marie saying thank you for helping me escape the map. So it stayed in character and plot all the way through.
And a lot of people spoke about the impact that had on them. how memorable it made the campaign, and I guess more importantly, how much it then forced them to go online and talk about their experience.
The results were more than we possibly hoped for. So we had over 700,000 people visiting the site. The completion rate was over 70%. The dwell time was incredible, over 5 minutes. So I think that was evidence that having plot, character and conflict is a great way to draw people in.
We were quite blown away. We had over 4 times the number of visitors to our website. This for us was a brand campaign with true measurement though. This was about us seeing, did people interact with us? Not had they just taken a message, but did they take a message and did they engage with what we were saying? And we saw overwhelmingly that they absolutely were. And it gave us great encouragement, I think, for the future campaigns that followed.
UDrive was quite similar in the way it used mass broadcast media to drive people into the interactive experience. So it was a jeopardous chase of a hip-hop star being driven by a female professional driver. We played the first 90-second ad. The public were invited to vote for the next plot, and they saw a sneak peek into what those next two narrative strands were, and then it was up to them to take the choice they wanted to. So it's proper real-time social interaction to drive broadcast action. Straight after that, people were invited to go onto a site to see every single narrative strand. So there's a really nice interactive mashup tool that existed on the site where they could go and basically build their own narrative plot.
So we created film posters, and anybody that commented or tweeted about it, we picked a random selection, and we were able then to create their own film poster, which we then tweeted back to them directly, which added just that extra special element for people, for a reward for interacting with the brand, really. This was a great piece of communication per se, but most importantly for us, it was centred around the car. And the car and the product, which was the most important piece for us in this communication, was at the heart of everything we did. That made it, a real success for us.
In the first ad break, where we asked people to vote for which narrative strand they wanted to see, we got 40,000 votes. And actually we had the highest trending hashtag on the night to show the intrigue that we generated and asking people to go and build their own narrative strands online. We had 3.8 million visits to the YouTube channel within the first 3 weeks of the campaign going live. And so if we looked at ad tracking, pre and post exposure, the average perceived driver age went down 8 years, and the brand having momentum shifted significantly versus Audi and BMW. So actually it had a brand halo effect, not just an effect on the model being advertised, which is what we wanted ultimately.
And at the end of the day, that was what we were doing. We were trying to change their perception. We were trying to show that this was not the stuffy, old brand that they might have expected. This was a dynamic brand for the future, and one that was relevant to them.
UDrive, I think, was the thing where we did it in real time, where you can see what happens when people are engaged via television programme, and can you get them in the moment to interact with advertising, which, in the break you wouldn't necessarily expect them to do, because they would want to tweet about the programme that they're watching, not necessarily about the advertising that breaks up the programming. So I think that degree of interaction we had in real time was extraordinary.
Now you can drive the story. Search New A-Class.
So Sound with Power, the third campaign, was really using a very clear consumer insight. The sound that comes out of an AMG, particularly when you start it, was something that had a really emotional resonance with people.
So we approached this company called Hidalgo, and they were the company that did the biometric reading for Felix Baumgartner. So they hooked him up and they measured his heart rate and his galvanic skin response to find out just what kind of levels of stress he was getting as he jumped from this balloon from the edge of space. So we approached them to find out what happens when you drive a Mercedes performance car. So we went to Mercedes-Benz World and we used exactly the same technology used for Felix Baumgartner, and we hooked 7 people up. So we realised that there's a profound physiological effect on people when they hear the sound of the engine, and that was the basis for the idea.
In the TV commercial, you see a guy being wired up with a special suit that measures his emotional responses to sound. And you see his physical reaction through the lights on this special suit to each of these sounds.
We bring the stars out.
What we then did was invite consumers to go online and create their own mashup.
It's basically a mashup tool where each time you get a choice of 2 different soundscapes that then mash together with the ones you've already chosen on the bigger screen. that there was something like 200 different choices. And you can imagine the permutations of those 200 choices to the different variants that you could mash together. Then we took the best 3 or 4 and we broadcast those live.
So with Sound with Power, we saw over 350,000 visits to the interactive YouTube site within the first 3 months of the campaign. So once again, we saw people really willing to come and talk to the brand and interact with the brand and share that. So across the 3 campaigns, the interactivity levels were beyond what we ever thought were likely.
We found sales lifting 45%, and that led to us smashing the 100,000 car mark in 2013. We actually achieved 108,000, which is incredible, and that represents about 5% market share of the total market, not just the prestige market.
Which is a really significant growth for Mercedes-Benz. We see now a younger audience than we've ever seen before. We've got a younger age profile of buyer than we've ever had before. And certainly when we look at many of the cars that we're taking in, or our retailers are taking in part exchange, we're seeing a very different kind of product and customer coming into the showrooms than we've ever seen before, which is really great news. So far more young and a far more mainstream audience as well, really.
So I think at the heart of the thinking in the campaign was, in order to change perceptions, a courageous and bold approach to total change of body language for the brand at the point where it needed significant business impact. Turned out to be not only a brave thing to do, but a very profitable thing to do.
At the start of the journey, we couldn't have anticipated the impact that we'd had by the end of the journey. It was scary at times, and I think doing something so different for a brand like Mercedes-Benz always will be. There was so many people during the whole period that would question and would ask, was this the right thing for Mercedes-Benz as a prestige brand to do? We had such a stable audience that had been buying for years. Was this going to alienate our audience? Actually, I think what we found was they further embraced us because of this.